I think I'm live. All right. Hi everyone, Heather here with Astrology.com, and I am back for my Thursday live video. A little bit late again, but next week you all go through daylight savings and I don't, so I'll be back on track and back on time. But anyway, if this is your first time joining me, every Thursday I do a live video. Sometimes I talk about different really important astrological events that are coming up, and sometimes I talk about just different topics in astrology. You know, I like to teach, I like to learn, I like to give you guys as much information about whatever topic it is that we are diving into. And today we're actually going to be talking about the houses in astrology. We're getting back to basics because, you know, we talk a lot about the different planets in the houses, the different energies as they're moving through the houses. You know, what does the sun in the first house mean? What does the sun in the 10th house mean? But we don't really talk a lot about the houses themselves and what that energy represents in astrology and, you know, what that means. So, you know, I'm going to go through and I'm going to talk about each of the 12 houses pretty in depth. You know, I'm going to go into basically my understanding and my interpretation of each of the houses. And so the way that I interpret the houses is a combination of a lot of different things. It's the energy that it's the Western astrological interpretation, right? Like that's sort of my foundation. I also look at Vedic astrology. I look at different traditional types of astrology as well. And I also look to see how these things work in the chart, right? Because a lot of times we'll read things and it'll be regurgitated over and over and over again, and we'll just accept it as being some sort of astrological truth. And then when you use it in the chart, it doesn't really work out that way necessarily. So yeah, so this is what I found basically. So I hope you guys enjoy it. My voice sounds like I take helium. No, nobody's ever told me that. Thank you, Miss Klasgener. I can't pronounce your name. Okay, so I'm going to get right into this, and if you guys have any questions along the way, you know, feel free to interject and to ask me some questions. So basically the houses, when we talk about the houses, it's a different energy than the signs or the planets, right? And in order to know where the houses are in your birth chart and what, you know, signs and what planets are in the houses, of course you need to know your birth time and your birth location. And so if you don't know your birth time and your birth location, the only other way to really get that information is through a chart rectification, which I know there are plenty of astrologers that are on this channel that can do that for you. But you know, you do need the date, you do need the time, you do need the location in order to sort of get that information, right? And so this structures the entire chart. It gives context to the entire chart. And actually, before we jump right into this, I did forget to make a quick announcement that I have. I'm doing a webinar all about the Inconjunct aspect, which is a minor aspect in astrology. Really in depth, a lot of really innovative new information that works really, really well in the chart. And that's going to be on November 25th. And so if you want to sign up for that, the link is going to be in the description below. It's only $29 up until November 25th, and then it goes up to $39. So if you want to join live, you can do it for a little bit cheaper. So anyway, going back to the the houses and all of that. So I look at it in sort of this way. The planets are sort of like the verbs, right? They're where the action is. They're what's happening in the chart. The signs are sort of the energy or the lens that the energy of the planets is sort of filtered through. And then the house system gives everything context, right? It gives everything a placement. It gives it like, okay, well, this is happening here. And so there's a little bit of a different energy to it. Even though each house is ruled by a different sign and a different planet, the house itself carries a different energy than the sign and the planet. And so I'm just going to kind of go through and just jump into the signs. So I'm going to start with the first house. So the first house is ruled by Aries, which is ruled by Mars, right? So Mars would be the ruler, the traditional ruler of the actual first house. Aries is the sign that's associated with the first house. And so this area in the chart essentially represents, it's sort of like the ascendant sign, right? We talked about the ascendant in my video last week when we talked about the early childhood experience and how that develops your ascendant sign. The first house carries a lot of that similar energy. It's sort of your projection of your energy through your outward behavior. It's this lens through which you perceive the world and the lens through which other people perceive you. So it's sort of this filter through which all of your energy and your experiences are filtered through. It also represents how you look, right? It's your personality, it's your persona, it's the image that you project out into the world because you've learned through early childhood experience that this is what gets you love and this is what gets you acceptance. So this is the acceptable way of being and and behaving and energetically projecting your energy out into the world. And so we develop these personality characteristics, right? These personality characteristics, because our true core of our personality has more to do with the sun. But when we look at the first house and we look at the ascendant, these are these personality characteristics that we've developed through our experience, especially in early childhood. And so it represents essentially who we are and what we are and how we portray our energy out in the world. Again, it's the physical appearance. You can get a lot about how people look and how people engage in terms of their energy through looking at the first house. It's also how you express your will out into the world, right? It's projecting your energy out into the world. It's doing what you want to do, right? It's Mars, it's the will. And it's one of the angular houses. So there are 4 angular houses. There are 3 different types of houses. There are the angular houses, the succedent houses, and then the Cayden houses. So this is one of the 4 angular houses, and those are those cardinal cross points, right? These are the 4 parts in the chart that sort of give structure and form to your chart. It's like if you had a house, this is the frame of the house that's holding everything together and holding everything up. And so, you know, having your planets on like any of these cardinal points or any of these sort of angular houses indicate sort of some sort of prominence out in the world. It indicates an importance of these placements. But essentially what this does is it gives structure, it gives meaning to the chart, right? It structures your personality, it structures your persona, it structures your life, really, these 4 areas, because it represents who you are and what you are out in the world, your relationships, your home and your family life. And then up on the midheaven, the other angular house, which would be the 10th house, represents your career and your public reputation. So it's the energy that you put out into the world for public consumption. And so this is one of the 4 angular houses. It sets the tone for the entire chart. The rising sign is essentially the sign that was on the eastern horizon from the exact moment and the exact placement of your birth. So when you were born, this was the sign in the tropical zodiac that was on the eastern horizon. And so it represents sort of what we came in through. It's, you know, our early childhood experience develops this, and it's sort of our persona. And that's essentially the gist of the first house. Let's see. Okay. Do you guys have any questions about those? Cool. All right, so I'm going to go into the second house now. So the second house is the house that's associated with the sign of Taurus, and also, you know, the planet Venus, which is the ruler of Taurus. It is a succedent house. So while the angular houses are the houses that give structure and form to the chart, you know, they give structure and form to your life. The succedent houses, they represent areas of stability, willpower, purpose. They're all the fixed signs in the zodiac. So they give us sort of purpose, they give us meaning, they give us value throughout our lifetimes in very physical and non-physical ways. And so so the second house is the house of Taurus, right? It represents our financial situation. It represents sort of what we value in terms of physical resources, in terms of material possessions. It also shows us our attitude and our experiences when it comes to personal matters, and the planets there give us an idea of that experience as well. The sign that rules the second house can tell us how we can best create resources for ourselves and what our attitude is toward those resources. So an example is, you know, if you have Sagittarius on the second house cusp, that would mean that you need to, in order to create wealth for yourself, you need to act with integrity, right? It wouldn't do you any good to really create wealth out of something that is not in alignment with your integrity. So doing a job that you perceive as like evil or bad or, you know, diabolical in some sort of way, that wouldn't really work for you, and you probably wouldn't be able to earn as much money as you would doing something that is in alignment with your values and your integrity, right? So that's kind of how the energy works when you look at the house cusp for the second house. And then the planets that are in the second house, they represent the energy and the attitudes that you have surrounding resources. They can show you, you know, if things are going to be easy for you financially. They can show you if things are going to be a little bit more difficult, like maybe you have Saturn there, which doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to have resources. It just means that you have to work really hard for them, and you believe that you have to work hard for your money as well, right? So that's kind of the energy of the second house. It's how you feel about money. It's your beliefs about resources, and it's the best way that you can earn your possessions. You can earn your resources. It also, you know, if we look at like medical astrology and things like that, it rules the body. It can rule food. You know, Taurus is the throat. So, you know, those types of things in there can be indicated, you know, by that as well. It rules like body and bodily movements, you know, physical arts, those types of things as well. But for the most part, it's very much about possessions and what we hold on to in our possessions. It's the money and the finances we create for ourselves through our own hard work. it's different from, you know, the 8th house, which is like money that we get through other people's resources, other people's money. This is about our own hard work and our own efforts and how we generate resources through our own effort, like physical, you know, effort, right? Because it's physical, it's Taurus, it's fixed. And so, yeah, that's, you know, the 2nd house, at least the gist of it. Okay. And then the 3rd house in astrology. So the 3rd house is the house that's ruled by Gemini. So it's ruled by Gemini, it's ruled by Mercury, it's all about communication. And this is one of the Cayden houses. So the Cayden houses are the 3rd, the 6th, the 9th, and the 12th house. And all of these have to do with mental activity, communication, our beliefs. They're the day-to-day experiences as well as the bigger picture. It's about our perception and the way that we communicate ideas. And it's also about our inner and our outer experience, right? Because we're looking at also the 6th and the 12th houses in there as well. And so the energy of the 3rd house is cultivated through our interactions in early childhood with our siblings, our relatives, our cousins. You know, it also has to do with our early childhood education. So the type of schooling that we had can be indicated by the house cusp of the 3rd house and the planets that are positioned in the 3rd house as well. This can also indicate how the mind functions on an instinctual level. And while this house kind of sounds boring, right? You look at the 3rd house, it's like, oh, it's just about communication and like learning practical skills and those types of things. When you really think about it, and what it really boils down to is that this is a house that really shapes your everyday experience, right? It's your day-to-day communications, it's your interactions with your neighbors, right? It rules neighbors, it rules your community. It's your day-to-day travel, so it's your commute, right? It's cars, it's bikes, it's going on short distance travel, like short distance trips. It's your commute to work, it's your commute, you know, to wherever it is that you're going. It really affects your day-to-day experience on a very like sort of subtle, mundane level. And so it indicates your communication style. It indicates how you've learned to communicate through your experience, because again, it's the context, it's the environment in which you learned, you know, these practical skills that you learned communication. It's also things like math, you know, like grade school education. All of these types of things are ruled by this 3rd house. And because it has to do with like our communication, our mind, you know, early childhood education and those things as well, certain planets that are sort of dysfunctional in the 3rd house, so if they are afflicted in some sort of way, or if the ruler of the 3rd house is afflicted in some sort of way, or if you have like Chiron in the 3rd house, it can, but not always, but it can indicate some sort of learning disability, right? So maybe like dyslexia or ADHD or, you know, something along those lines. It can be indicated by the 3rd house. And the early childhood experience with education, right? So if you have Chiron in the 3rd house, it could be that there's some sort of wound around your early childhood experience where, you know, in early education, you had trouble with numbers, or you had trouble with like language, or, you know, something along those lines. But, you know, in general, yeah, it's about communication and how we create our communication style through our experience. So a lot of these houses are more like experiential, right? They're about our environment. Okay. So I'm going to move on to the 4th house. So the 4th house is the house that's ruled by Cancer. And again, it's one of the angular houses. It gives structure and form to the chart. And so the 4th house is your attitude towards the home and family, and it also has to do with your early childhood experience. It's your experience of the home and family environment in early childhood. So a lot of times when you have sort of difficult planets in the 4th house, especially Pluto or Mars, and especially if they're afflicted, there could have been violence or very intense situations, you know, in the early childhood in your home environment. And so, you know, Mars in the 4th house, not always, but a lot of times it does indicate either violence or aggression in the home, either verbal aggression or physical aggression, right? So we look at those types of things because it helps us to sort of look at where a person came from, right? It's your roots. It's also your ancestral patterns. So it's the patterns that you pick up through your ancestors, not even just the ones that you interact with in your early childhood experience, but it's your ancestral patterns through even the ones that have passed, right? So it's looking at our ancestors, it's looking at our roots in a very deep way. It's also obviously on a more mundane level represents the home environment, right? It's our house, it's our property. It's what we need in order to feel comfortable and safe and stable in our home and our family situation. So an example of that would be, you know, if you have Cancer on the 4th house cusp, you need a very safe, very emotionally nurturing, you want to feel protected, you know, you want to have all those sort of Cancerian energies in the home and family. But on the other end of that spectrum, well, actually not on the other end of that spectrum, but like say you have Aquarius or on the fourth house cusp, or you have Uranus on the fourth house cusp, which would be the IC, that would indicate that you'd have like a non-traditional sort of lifestyle where maybe you move around a lot. Maybe your family was a little bit eccentric or odd when you were like growing up or something like that, or maybe you just didn't have that normal white picket fence, like, you know, traditional family values experience in your early childhood. And so later on in life, you feel more comfortable if you're moving around, if you're doing different things, if your home is a little bit non-conventional, those types of things, right? So the energy of the cusp of the houses, it indicates what you need in that area, right? And what you value. And even if you think that you want something else, you might not feel quite so comfortable, right? So if you have that Aquarius on the IC, you might think that you want the white picket fence and the stability, but when you have it, you feel unsettled, right? You feel frustrated, you feel like you need more freedom. And so that's just kind of a little bit about the fourth house cusp and the fourth house. The fourth house also can represent the mother in early childhood. It can also represent the father as well, whoever was like the nurturing maternal figure. It's that sense of feeling safe, that sense of feeling secure, and that sense of nurturing in early childhood. And it shows whether or not you had that in your life, and it shows how that experience was, well, perceived, right? It's how you had that experience, it's how that experience was perceived by you, and it's how you carry that into your adult life. And it sort of shapes your needs when it comes to your home and family situation later on in life. All right. And again, it rules real estate and property too, so it could show you what kind of property, if you want to own property, where you should live, those types of things as well, because the energy of that sign is going to give you a lot of clues into, you know, what's going to help you to feel more vital, more comfortable. It's going to give you the best, most solid roots, so you can sort of expand from there, right? Because it's one of those angular houses that sets, it's sort of the structure for your life, and you need to have like an appropriate home environment to sort of work off of, right? And build off of. So if your home is in order, then the opposite end of the spectrum, your career, your public reputation, you can focus on that without having to worry about everything being all like disheveled in terms of your home and family situation. So, you know, all of these four angular houses play off one another to create this sort of structure for your chart and for your birth chart. Okay, and so for the fifth house is kind of an interesting one. It's the house of Leo, right? So it's ruled by the sun, it's ruled by Leo. It's a succedent house. So basically it represents everything that you do to express your passion out in the world, right? It's about your heart, it's about your soul, it's about the things that you're truly passionate about, that you truly love to do, and that you do because you love to do them. So it's your hobbies, your interests, it's the things that you are deeply passionate about, and it's what you create out in the world from your passions, right? So it's like you have this passion and you take it out in the world and you create something out of it. It can also represent children, so it can represent your own children, your attitude toward children, your attitude toward play. It's like your inner child and the way that your inner child expresses itself as well. You know, it shows how did you play, like what did you like to do when you played as a child. Those types of things too can show up in the fifth house. So how do you express yourself through play? What hobbies do you have? What interests do you have? What do you love to what do you truly love to do? It also represents like on a more mundane level, it can be like leaders, you know, politicians can be ruled by the fifth house, actors, entrepreneurs, because it rules things that you create, right, through your own self-expression. So you take your passion, you turn it into a business. Also, obviously, it's the house of romance, right? So it's love affairs, it's flings, it's boyfriends, it's girlfriends. It's not necessarily long-term relationships. That's more the seventh house, right? And the seventh house cusp, and the planets that are in the seventh house will indicate your marriage partnership. But the fifth house can indicate boyfriend relationships, girlfriend relationships, flings, love affairs, affairs in general, right? It can indicate, you know, those types of things. So, you know, really fun romances, but not necessarily long-term romances. So it can indicate to you, you know, your experience. The planets in there in the house cusp can indicate your experience with your boyfriends and girlfriends that don't necessarily last, but are, you know, a lot of fun. And then also, you know, in terms of like places and context and all of that, it rules like the entertainment industry, restaurants, parties, going out, you know, being seen, having fun, dancing, those types of things are all ruled by the fifth house as well. So, you know, things where you're out in the world, you're expressing yourself, you're being seen, you're having fun, you're playing, it's really light. It's a fun house for the most part. And so, you know, and even if you have a difficult planet in the fifth house, like maybe you have Saturn in the fifth house, or you have Capricorn on the fifth house, cusp, your work is like play, right? You enjoy doing the work that you do, and it can be something that can be fun for you, right? So yeah, it's usually for the most part a really good house. Let's see. Oh, and also in terms of like, you know, medical astrology and those types of things, the 5th house actually rules the chakras. So it's our energetic body, and it's our chakras, right? The 7 chakras. Not just the heart chakra, which you would think, because it's like Leo, it's the sun, you know, both of those are rulers of the heart. It's all of the chakras, it's the whole chakra system. And that's something that I learned from Lynn Coiner, who's a medical astrologer. Okay. And so the 6th house is another Cayden house. And so this one is ruled by Virgo. And Virgo is ruled by Mercury and or trans Pluto, depending on, you know, what you go by. But Mercury right now. And so this house, the 6th house, is our job. It's our day-to-day routines. It's our experience with our it's our day-to-day work experience. So traditionally it was sort of like how we treat our servants, right? It's how our energy and our attitude toward people that are inferior to us in terms of their social standing, their social position. But nowadays it more rules your work environment. It rules your coworkers. It rules your sort of interactions and your relationship with your coworkers. So, you know, if you have like a afflicted Uranus in the 6th house, you can have really chaotic, difficult experiences with your coworkers, you know, and it's constantly changing and moving, and maybe there's high turnover, you know, at the job that you have, right? It can also indicate sort of our day-to-day routines and how we like to structure our day-to-day lives. It's about physicality too, and it's about hard work, right? The 10th house is our overall career. It's the big picture. The 2nd house is, you know, how we gain resources. The 6th house is the hard work that we do to create the bigger picture in our 10th house and to create the resources in our 2nd house. And so it's about hard work. It's about creating solid, stable routines. It's about paying attention to also our health, right? It's the healing house. It's the house of health. It's the house of nutrition. So it can show us, you know, potential health problems. It can show us what we need in terms of nutrition, in terms of supporting our body, you know, through the food that we eat and through the way that we take care of ourselves, through our daily routines. You know, so all of these different things are indicated in the 6th house. It also indicates sort of health issues that we can be just born with. You know, that can be something that comes through the 6th house as well, right? Because the planets in the 6th house, the house of health, you know, we're born with those planets, right? So we would be born with those issues. Let's see. So I think that's a pretty good description of the 6th house. All right, and so the 7th house rules our marriage partnerships, our long-term relationships. So it's all of our one-on-one relationships with other people. It's not just our marriage partnerships, and it's not just love relationships. It's like any sort of contractual relationship. It's any close personal friendship, especially if you're really close with someone. It's a way that we engage one-on-one with people. If you work with clients, like if you're in some sort of industry where, you know, you work one-on-one with people, your clients can be ruled by the 7th house as well. And so this essentially provides the balance to the ascendant, right? The descendant is the opposite sign of the ascendant. So it shows us what we need in order to come into balance through our relationships. And so if you have like Cancer on the ascendant, right, you're very loving, very nurturing, very empathic, very intuitive. You know, you have this sort of mothering quality, or this sort of nurturing quality. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you would have Capricorn on the descendant, right? And so the ruler of the descendant would show us what we need in our marriage partnerships, and it would show us sort of the nature of our marriage partnerships and what kind of marriage partner we would attract. And so if it was Capricorn, you would need someone who's very stable, very grounded, very responsible, who would show up to work really hard to provide, you know, structure for your family and like all those types of things. And then also, you know, if there's another sign in the house, because I look at Placidus, so, you know, if there's another sign in the house, you have to account for that energy, and you also have to account for the planets. So the planets are what's going on there, right? So the planets in the house can show us, you know, what developments take place in our marriage partnerships and in our relationships, and how those marriage partnerships and those relationships come about, and what we need in order to feel satisfied in our marriages and in any long-term partnership, right? This isn't just marriage, of course, but it's the main thing with the 7th house is marriage partnership. So it shows us what we need in order to feel good about our marriage. It shows us our attitude towards marriage as well. That's ruled by the 7th house area. It can show us what we like and what we dislike in others as well. So, you know, there's a lot going on in the 7th house. And again, it's one of those houses, it's the angular house, so it provides structure and form right through our relationships. It's the foundation of our chart. It's the foundation of our lives, our home, our family, our self, and our relationships, and our career. That's the 10th house. All right. And then the 8th house. What are you guys doing up here? Cool. So the 8th house is the house that actually, so the 8th house is kind of like an interesting house. It's one of the succeedant houses. It's ruled by Scorpio, so it's ruled by Pluto and Mars as well. It has to do with power. The 8th house is all about power. It shows us how we give our power away to other people and how we can gain our power back in return, how we can become empowered in a lot of different ways. So it's about power and control and things that are beyond our control. It rules our deep-seated fears, deep psychological issues. This is a deeply restorative, deeply transformative, deeply regenerative house. It's one of the healing houses. It's the house that where we can find our deepest healing, where we're healing from the inside out, from a core level. It also rules things that are secretive, hidden, taboo, that are seen as dark, that are seen as like sort of devious in some sort of way, even if they're not. It's just sort of the energy that we project onto it because it's our fears, right? It's the things that we're fearful of. You know, it's a very secretive house. It also rules our obsessions, our compulsions, right? It rules obsessive behavior, and having certain planets in the 8th house can indicate obsessive compulsive behaviors, right? And like having Venus in the 8th house, right, would show that we can become obsessed with our partners because we're so passionate about them. Hopefully in a good way and not in a bad way, right? But sometimes if it's afflicted, it can get a little over the top. It also rules sex, right? So it's the house of sex. It's the house of things that are taboo. It's sex on a tantric level. It's sex on like a raw, visceral level. It's sex that's deeply connected. It's not sex, well, it's sex for procreation. Yeah, that's part of it too. But it's more about that, like that lust and that intensity and that passion. And again, power, right? Power issues that have power and control issues that are expressed through sexuality would be showing up in the 8th house as well. Issues with your sexuality, that would show up in the 8th house. You know, also it's, of course, debt and other people's money. So again, power and control, right? If you're in debt, somebody else has power over you. They're holding power over you through their control of your resources. And so, you know, it's money that we borrow from others. It's money that we borrow from banks. It's our debt. It's taxes that we owe to the government, right? It's how they could maintain control over us. They make us pay taxes. It's also inheritance, right? It's death, and it's money that we inherit through death and through, you know, death of a family member or something along those lines. It's also money that we can get through marriage partnerships. So, you know, when you're married in the 7th house and the 8th house, that's when you merge your energy, right? You merge your energy through procreation, which is ruled by the 8th house. You merge your energy through your sexuality and sexual expression, and you merge your resources, right? So it's your joint finances, it's your partner's resources as well. I think I covered a lot of things about this house. This is one of my favorite houses to go into because it's so deep and there's so much complexity there. There's a lot that goes on in these houses, and there's a lot you can gain from learning about these houses. This also rules, you know, esoteric topics, occult rituals. It rules like deep psychic experiences, things like shamanic journeying, where you're really going deep and like getting really in there. You know, those types of things, those types of experiences are ruled by the 8th house as well. And again, for a medical house, this is a deeply restorative, deeply regenerative, transformative house, and a lot of really powerful healers can have a lot of planets in the 8th house because really they're healing from the core, right? They're healing from the inside out, not just the physical. Okay. And then the 9th house. So the 9th house is another one of the Cayden houses. So again, it rules like our thoughts, our beliefs, our perceptions, all those types of things. And so the 9th house is the house that's ruled by Sagittarius and Jupiter. This house shows, you know, wisdom that we gain through our experiences, right? It's experiential. It's about mental and physical exploration. It has to do with our deep philosophies about life. It's how we gain meaning and purpose in life through our experience with God, with the universe, our philosophy, our religion, our spiritual spiritual experiences and how we frame that, you know, in terms of like our mentality. It has to do with like our life philosophies, our codes, our ethics, our integrity, right? That lies here. So how we believe, what we believe in terms of our moral values, that is something that is gained from our life experiences in the ninth house, or experiences that were sort of projected onto us or forced onto us in the early childhood experience, right? So if we had an experience with religion early on, that would also be represented most likely by the ninth house, depending on, you know, what went on with that. So it shows us the best type of spirituality, the best type of philosophy for us to pursue. It shows us, you know, it has to do with long distance travel as well, and foreign countries, and dealing with foreigners in foreign countries in a way that expands our minds, expands our horizons. It also has to do with higher education. So this isn't like high school education, this is college, this is grad school, this is your doctorate, right? These are all in the ninth house. So higher education, where you're really expanding your mind, expanding into higher concepts and higher wisdom. Our teachers are also represented by the ninth house, and that can include fathers and father figures, right? Those are a part of the ninth house experience, especially if you saw your father or your grandfather as like someone who was wise, who was a teacher, who would lead you. This is probably more so like in traditional astrology, right? Like back in the day where we had like the wise elders, those would be in the ninth house. Nowadays, we don't necessarily have that. We don't necessarily respect our elders in the same way, and sometimes they don't necessarily have that wisdom, right? Not everybody's on that level. So it really depends on your experience with your father and like these fatherly figures and these teacher figures. But it does represent your teachers. It can represent like gurus and things like that. So it can represent the good and the bad sides of that as well. And, you know, it's very expansive. It's how we expand our horizons. It's how we go beyond ourselves to create meaning and purpose. It's the bigger picture, the broader perspective in life. The third house is sort of like the day-to-day experiences. It's day-to-day skills. It's like the practical. It's, you know, communication. It's all those like mental, analytical experiences, where the ninth house expands our horizons. It's the broader perspective. Okay, and the 10th house. So the 10th house, again, is one of those angular houses. And so the 10th house, the 10th house, sorry, the 10th house is another one of those angular houses. It's the house that's ruled by Capricorn and Saturn, and it represents our career and our public reputation. So it's the way that we take in this day and age, you know, the sun doesn't always represent the father, the moon does not always represent the mother, the IC doesn't always represent the mother, and the midheaven doesn't always represent the father. It could be that, you know, the mother was the more dominant, more authoritative, fatherly figure in the early childhood experience, and vice versa with the father, you know, being more of the nurturing figure. So, you know, it depends on your experience with your parent and who was that figure for you. But it represents traditionally the father, the authority figure in childhood, how you responded to authority in childhood, and how that carries over into your adult experience. It shows our professional orientation and what we need in order to feel successful out in the world. It can show us what type of career is best suited for us. It shows us if we have like a lot of planets in the 10th house, that can indicate a really prominent career where we're out in the world, we're being seen, we need to be recognized for what we're doing in a very physical sense by a lot of people. And also it can indicate that we need to be in a position of authority, or we need to like be in a leadership role, or we need to like own our own business or something along those lines as well. Having like the sun in the 10th house, right, indicates a really prominent career, indicates that you'll probably own your own business, you'll definitely be in some sort of position of authority, but it also indicates that your success in life comes later on in life, right? So it comes, you know, usually around, you know, age 50, something along those lines. Like after that point, that's when you reach your peak of success, when you have the sun in the 10th house, because the 10th house is ruled by Capricorn. It's the things that, you know, get better with age. They come a little bit later on. And usually for most people, your career success, your overall career, that bigger picture when it comes to your work and, you know, what it is that you're putting out into the world, that starts to develop later on. Not for everyone, right? Like everybody's a little bit different. That's just one example of it. But it does indicate your career and how you project your energy out into the world. And so the planet that's on the house cusp, that's on your MC, that would give you an idea of the energy surrounding your career and what careers would be best suited for you. And the planets in the house would obviously indicate that as well. All right, and so the 11th house is another one of the succeeding houses, and so the 11th house is ruled by Aquarius, and it's also ruled by Uranus and Saturn, because Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius. Now that we know that Uranus exists, and Saturn is the traditional ruler of Aquarius, which seems kind of funny, right? Because Aquarius is supposed to be all free-spirited and all of that, but they're also a little bit rigid, a little bit cool, a little bit dogmatic. So, you know, they have a little bit of both of those energies. And so, you know, this house rules a lot of those things as well. And so this house shows our attitude towards our friends. It shows what types of friends we can attract as well. You know, a lot of times the sign that's on the house cusp and the planets in the house indicate our friendships and the types of friends that we surround ourselves with, and the types of friends that we're drawn to and that are drawn to us. So if you have, let's say, Neptune, you know, in your 11th house, or if you have Pisces on the 11th house cusp, you can get a lot of dreamy, Neptunian, creative, floaty, sort of ungrounded friends that are, you know, very, you know, kind of woo-woo spiritual types of people. But you can also draw in friends that are very deceptive, right? So you don't see them quite clearly because you want to put on these rose-colored glasses. You want to see them for what you want to see, because you want to see your friends out of this lens of love and compassion, because that shows that you have a deep compassion and a deep empathy for your friends if you have Pisces on the 11th house cusp. But through that compassion, through that empathy, sometimes you can gloss over the details and you can miss what's truly going on there on a realistic level. So that can indicate deception from friends. Also, it can indicate, so the planets in the house, right, they indicate things that are going on within your friendships. And so, you know, if you have, for example, Saturn in the 11th house, it can indicate that you might not have a lot of friends, or that early on you didn't have like very many friends. And so, you know, the friendships that you do have are very stable, very committed, very long lasting, but there tend to be fewer of them, and you tend to be a little bit more solitary. You know, those types of things can be indicated by the 11th house. So it shows how wide your circle expands, how many friends you have, what you like to do with your friends, what types of friends you have. It also indicates your, so the 11th house in traditional astrology could indicate the money. It's the rewards that you get. It's the gifts that you get. It's the social rewards that you get from the hard work that you put in your 10th house. So you work really hard in your 10th house, right? And then you get money, right? You get rewards, you get gifts, you get recognition in social circles and social groups. And this doesn't just rule friends, it rules all social networks. So if you're in some sort of group, you know, it can indicate that. Also charity, right? You make money in the 10th house and with your career, and then you give it back. You do something that's humanitarian, you do something that's helping other people. So it's how you show up to help other people in large groups, and how you connect with humanity as a whole. That's the 11th house as well. Connecting with groups, connecting with like large groups of people, connecting with all of humanity. And it's also, you know, how you show up in service to humanity. Let's see. And then finally, the 12th house. The 12th house is one that's kind of mysterious, right? It's very secretive. It's the house of secrets. It's the house of things that are hidden away. The 12th house, you know, just like Pisces. So Pisces is the ruler of the 12th house, as would be Neptune and Jupiter. It's another one of the Cayden houses. And so this is a house that it shows things that are suppressed, that are hidden. A lot of times the energies of the planets that are in those houses, they remain suppressed and hidden away beneath the surface. An example of this would be like if you have your sun in the 12th house, especially if it's in like a water sign, you might be very shy in early childhood, right? Because you don't want to let your light shine out in the world. You don't want to be seen. You don't want your personality to be out there in the world to be seen and recognized. You're kind of hidden away. So it's things that we keep hidden below the surface. It's things that we don't necessarily want other people to see. And it's sometimes things that we don't understand ourselves because they're hidden from us. It also encompasses the energy of all 12 houses. It's the house of endings, right? It's the house of purging, letting go, cutting ties, cutting cords. This house is very symbolic, very archetypal, very mystical. It's the house of dreams, right? Our dreams happen in the 12th house. It's the house of the realms beyond this realm. It's the house of other dimensions. It's the way that we sort of interpret things through the lens of spirituality. It's our solitude, it's our seclusion, it's our need for solitude, it's our need to be away from the world. If you look at the 6th house, right, which is the opposite end of the spectrum, that's being in the world and of the world and working really hard. The 12th house is where you go to escape. It's where you go to get away from the world. It rules, first off, it rules all things from the sacred to the profane. It rules all things that are hidden from the world. It rules hospitals. It rules asylums. It rules monasteries. It rules brothels. It rules, you know, ashrams. It rules spiritual retreat. So, you know, going off somewhere. Some people say it's foreign travel, but it's really more foreign travel if you're going to travel for spiritual purposes or to escape from the world, not necessarily traveling to expand your horizons, to expand your mind, to engage with, you know, other people and their energies. It's traveling to escape from your reality, right? You know, having a lot of planets here can indicate a lot of need for solitude, a lot of need for seclusion, a lot of need for escape. You know, this is a very difficult house to deal with because it's very non-physical and it's very not of this world or in this world. So having a lot of planets here can make it very difficult for you to sort of engage with the world, right? Because You're so non-physical, non-linear. This is also a very creative house. Creative writing can happen in this house, so like journaling, creative self-expression, you know, writing novels that are fictional and those types of things as well can happen in the 12th house, like secluding yourself away somewhere and like, you know, writing a novel. Yeah, I think that's a lot. So I think that's pretty much all for the 12th house. Let's see, do you guys have any questions about any of the houses? What if Saturn is in the 12th? Saturn in the 12th can indicate that you spent some time in seclusion or that you have a need to spend some time in seclusion. Like, I had one client specifically that had Saturn and Chiron in the 12th house, and they spent some time hidden away from the world, like in a monastery, their whole like early childhood with their parents. So that can indicate, you know, spending time in seclusion, being forced into seclusion for some sort of reason. You know, so if you have Saturn in the 12th house, that could be one of the expressions, not the only expression, but it does indicate a deep need for solitude, a deep need for seclusion, and it can indicate that there was a difficult experience early on where you had to be hidden away from the world for some reason. Let's see. What other guys do you have here? What questions? Cancer in the 11th house. So Cancer in the 11th house, especially if it's the ruler of the 11th house cusp, or Moon in the 11th house, because I have both those questions. So Cancer or Moon in the 11th house can indicate that, you know, you're sort of you're the nurturer of your friend group, right? You like to nurture your friends. You're like the mama bear that takes care of everyone and makes sure that everybody's okay. You know, it also indicates that your friends are like family to you, right? Your friends are like family. And having the Moon there, again, same thing as like having Cancer there, or a similar thing to having Cancer there. You nurture your friend groups. You feel nurtured by your friend groups, and your friends feel like family to you. You feel safe, you feel secure, you feel supported when you're with your friends. Rahu in the 4th house. North Node in the 4th house. That's an interesting one. I have that placement. So North Node in the 4th house indicates that part of your path and part of your purpose is to lay down roots and to be comfortable in the home and family situation. Normally when you have the North Node in the 4th house, that means you have the South Node in the 10th house, right? So you'll do better sort of working from home, working independently, integrating that career life with the home life, right? Merging the two. So working from home can be really, really good. Working independently can be really, really good for someone who has Rahu or the North Node in the 4th house. And it can feel uncomfortable for you to engage with that 4th house energy because it's something that you're ambivalent about. It's something that feels exciting to you, but you've never really mastered or done before. So you can feel fearful to sort of develop a family, develop, you know, roots, lay down roots to, you know, engage with that energy. But that's really something that you're here to do. Stellium in the 9th house just indicates that you have like a lot of energy surrounding finding deeper meaning, higher purpose, expanding your horizons, experiencing things, right? Expanding your mind through your experiences is a major theme if you have a stellium in the 9th house. Higher education, higher learning, looking at the broader perspective. You know, traveling can be really good depending on what planets are there. I mean, the stellium kind of depends on the planets, right? But there's a lot of energy surrounding this 9th house area, which has a lot to do with your philosophies, the way that you find meaning and purpose, and like exploration through expansion through experience. Okay, I'm going to do one more of these. Mercury and Sun in the 10th. What is MC is the midheaven. Let's see. What did you say, Mercury? So we talked about Sun in the 10th. Mercury in the 10th would indicate like a lot of a career that involves communication, where you need to connect and talk and speak to a lot of people. You know, you're constantly engaging. It could be marketing, it could be writing, it could be anything really where you're communicating with people on a broader scale. That would be really good use of the energy of Mercury in the 10th house. Not the only way to use it, but it's one way. Writing, communication, educating others, right? That could indicate that you could have a prominent career where you teach other people practical skills. That could be something as well. Also, you need to use your mind, right? If you have Mercury in the 10th house, your career, you have to use your mind in your career. You have to use your mental abilities. You have to use your intelligence, your intellect. And you need a career that's mentally stimulating for you, right? All right, guys. Declinations. Muriel, declinations are an interesting topic that I'm starting to really get into, especially like lunar declination and out of bounds planets. Maybe I'll do a video on that once I've, you know, played with it a little bit more. I like to make sure that I really know what I'm talking about and I've used it in the charts first. But declinations, I do consider, especially with the moon. If your moon is out of bounds, that's something worth definitely looking into. All right, guys. I think that whole signs are Placidus. I look at both whole signs and Placidus. So I would say look at both. You get a little bit of a different information from each one. Placidus can be a little bit more nuanced. Whole signs can be really good for interpretation. You guys have so many questions. Oh my goodness. I want to answer all of them, but I do need to get off this call because I have another appointment. So if you want to, book a reading with me, if you have, questions about your own chart, you can do that at the link below. And I'm also going to be teaching, this Inconjunct webinar November 25th. If you're into astrology, if you're into learning astrology, which I know a lot of you are, this would be a really great webinar to join. You're going to get really in-depth 4 to 5 hours about inconjunct aspects, everything that I've learned about it and everything you need to know to really get into the chart and to interpret inconjunct aspects like a master astrologer. So this is going to be a really great webinar. So definitely look into that, sign up for that. And again, if you want to book a reading with me, you guys have been wonderful. I've been booking so many wonderful readings with so many wonderful people through this channel. And, I love hearing from you. So thank you so much, you guys. I will see you very soon next Thursday. Bye.